Hello. We're getting ready to read Chapter 7 about the I Survived the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. And if you remember, our main character, Oscar, our hero, had followed a little girl who had stolen his luggage to her house and found her alone with a newborn baby. And then everything broke loose and the fire started, and he tried to hide, and he's getting burned. And the last words were, he opened his mouth, but he was too horrified to even scream. So let's see what's going to happen next. Chapter 7. Oscar Pritchett sprinted toward the house, swatting away the burning flakes that swarmed around him. He watched with terror as the fire quickly danced off the roof. Where were the kids? Why hadn't they come bursting through the door? Come on, he whispered as though he could grab hold of them with his words. But still no one appeared. Oscar rushed up the crumbling steps and pounded on the front door. Hey, come out! Nothing. He tried the door, but it was locked tight. Where were they? Shouts rang from the street. Fire! 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 Oscar whirled around. 2 other houses were burning like torches. The wind was gusting and the flames were leaping across the street. Boom! A house caught fire as if it had been caught by as if it were made of dried straw. Any minute, the whole street would be a sea of fire. Oscar had to get away. He had to get back to Mama. But how could he leave here with these kids who were still in the house? Of course he couldn't leave. Oscar slammed his shoulder to the door. Bam, bam, bam. On the third try, the door frame splintered and the door burst open. Oscar stumbled in, falling to his knees. Smoke swirled all around him. He rose to his feet, gasping for breath. Hello, he screamed. Where are you? Where are you? And that's when he heard them. Just above the fire's roar, muffled cries came from upstairs. Or was it just the wind and the fire fooling his ears? Was it possible the kids had escaped through another door? Oscar stumbled in the narrow staircase, peering up into the churning cloud of black smoke. Don't be an idiot, he told himself. Don't go up those stairs. Hello, Oscar called, praying that nobody would answer, hoping that the children were long gone. But no. Please help us, shouted a little terrified voice, the girl's voice. There was no choice. With shaking legs, Oscar started up the stairs. He pulled his shirt over his mouth and covered his nose. It did nothing to block out the smoke. Every breath burned his throat and lungs, but the worst was the blistering heat. With each step, it got hotter and hotter. Oscar could practically feel his blood boiling, his skin sizzling, his flesh cooking on his bones. He wouldn't last too long up here, and neither would Jenny and Bruno. At the top of the stairs was a closed door. Somebody pounded on the other side. Here, Jenny shouted. The door is stuck. Please help us. Oscar pushed against the door, but it wouldn't budge. Stand back, he choked. Oscar kicked the door as hard as he could. The door crushed open, releasing a wave of heat and even thicker smoke that pushed Oscar back to his heels. He teetered and almost fell down the stairs, but somehow he managed to regain his balance. Jenny came rushing out with Bruno in her arms. They were both coughing and wheezing. Their faces were black with soot and streaking with tears. Jenny was clutching Bruno with all her might, but her skinny arms were losing their grip. Oscar reached for Bruno, and to his surprise, the kid didn't resist. Oscar pulled Bruno into his arms, holding him close to his chest. The poor boy's heart was pounding even harder than Oscar's. Jenny stood unmoved, dazing and coughing. Oscar was afraid she might faint. Oscar grabbed her arm and pointed her down the stairs, gripping her shoulder in case she slipped. He followed right on her heels. Run straight through the front door, Oscar said to her, as quickly as you can. Jenny did what she was told, gaining strength as they reached the bottom. Oscar put Bruno down at the bottom of the stairs, and Jenny grabbed the little boy's hand before they flew out the door. Oscar was just steps behind them, and then, crash! The window shattered. Kaboom! A giant ball of fire and cinders blasted into the room. Oscar fell to the floor, and there is nothing but flames. I don't think it was a newborn baby. I think he's a toddler. But Oscar, he's doing a lot for his age. Chapter 8. Again, Oscar felt as though he were being attacked by a wild animal, a monster with burning tentacles and boiling breath. It grabbed him, clawed at him, and spun him around. Smoke gushed in his nose and down his throat, filling his lungs with searing poison. He couldn't open his eyes, but he knew the fire was all around him. He dropped to the ground, crawling, blindly groping at the door. But he had no idea where he was. It was like being trapped in a flaming maze. His lungs were ready to explode. Was this the end? Was he going to die right here? And then he heard a voice. This way, this way. Mama? Turn right, the voice shouted, tugging him, guiding him. Oscar turned. No, it wasn't Mama's voice. It was Jenny's. Yes, now straight, hurry. And then she held his hand, then he felt a hand on his arm, pulling him up. Seconds later, he was out the door. He had just steps away from the house when the house made a terrifying whoosh and an explosion of hot air. They rushed forward and Jenny grabbed Bruno from wherever he had been hiding behind a barrel. They ran across the street and fell on the ground. Oscar's head throbbed and his entire body felt it as if it had been roasted. Whew. Oscar lay back and closed his eyes. For a long minute, he stayed there trying to catch his breath. He might have stayed like that for hours, but only a minute or so had passed before he felt someone breathing in his face. He opened his eyes and saw a huge, curly head hovering over him with wide open eyes. Bruno? Hey, you're not dead, he croaked. Hush, Bruno, Jenny whispered. That's not a polite thing to say. But he's not dead, Bruno insisted, putting his face closer to Oscar's so his slimy little nose touched Oscar's nose. Then he put his gooey mouth on Oscar's ears and whispered, You're not dead. This kid was not going to quit. Oscar put his hand on Bruno's head. I know, he said. Jenny knelt down and gently peeled Bruno away from Oscar. Give him a little room, Jenny said. Oscar managed to sit up. He stared ahead at the little house, which had been torn apart by the flames. The wood moaned and sighed as it collapsed into the fire, as if crying out in pain. It was sickening, like watching a rabbit get torn apart by a coyote. Bruno wriggled close to Oscar until his small shoulder pressed against Oscar's arm. My house, he said, pointing sadly. Oscar didn't know what to say, so he just put an arm around the boy. The fire burned so bright that it lit up all the faces. It was the first time Jenny had the chance to take a good look at Oscar. Now Oscar waited to see the shock on her face when she realized who he was. But there was no flash of recognition. She looked exactly how Oscar felt, scared, dazed, and amazed to be alive. Their eyes locked together, and Oscar could tell that Jenny didn't recognize the kid she tricked at the train station. She saw a different boy, the boy who helped her and Bruno escape from the fire. And as Oscar looked at Jenny, he didn't see a helpless orphan or a ruthless thief. He saw a brave girl who had watched out for her brother all by herself, whose voice had led Oscar out of the blazing house in just the nick of time. And then there was Bruno, who grinned at Oscar as though he had been best friends for all their lives. "I, Bruno," he said, looking up at Oscar and puffing out his chest. "I'm Oscar," Oscar said. "Oscar," Bruno said. "I'm Jenny," Jenny said. They all sat there a minute looking at each other. Had he and Jenny really only just laid eyes on each other tonight? Oscar eased his arm from around Bruno and struggled to his feet, brushing the dust and ashes off his burned clothes. His body ached, but his mind felt surprisingly clear. He knew exactly what to do. "We need to get to the Palmer House Hotel," he said. He said the word "we" very clearly. "My mother is there," Oscar said. "The hotel is fireproof. We'll be safe there." Oscar picked up Bruno and held out his free hand to Jenny. She took it and gripped it tight, and together they began their journey through Chicago's burning streets. Wow, wonder what's going to happen when they meet up with Mama. Wonder if Mama's safe. We'll read more tomorrow. Bye-bye.